3 years, 11 months, and 14 days. That was how long Talia had kept the math at a safe distance, not forgetting, just refusing to let it get loud. Creston, Oregon had helped with that. The town was small enough to have one stoplight and large enough to have secrets, which was exactly the kind of place a woman rebuilt herself in when the alternative was staying somewhere that knew her real name. The morning it all came undone started the same way every morning started, with her daughter refusing to put on shoes. Zia. She said it without looking up from the chart she was reviewing at the kitchen counter, the Beaumont boys' strep cultures, which she needed to call in before she opened the clinic at 8. We leave in 10 minutes. My shoes are wet. Shoes don't get wet indoors. I put them outside because I wanted to see if it would rain. Talia set down the chart. She turned around. Zia was standing in the middle of the kitchen in her purple raincoat, both socks, no shoes, wearing the particular expression she wore when she had done something she already knew the verdict on. And did it rain? A little. Okay. Talia crossed to the back door, opened it, retrieved 2 small sneakers from the porch. They were damp but not soaked. She set them in front of her daughter without a word. Zia put them on without further protest, which was unusual enough that Talia noted it. 4 years old was a complicated age. Some mornings were battle, some mornings were truce, and on the truce mornings, you didn't ask why. The clinic was 6 blocks from their rented house on Alder Street. They walked it every morning, had walked it since Zia was 8 months old, and Talia had strapped her into a carrier and done the route for the first time, telling herself it was good exercise and not letting herself think about the other reason, that on foot, with no car registered to her name, she was harder to find. It was March in Creston, which meant gray sky and the smell of the coast, even though the ocean was 4 miles west, and you could only see it from the ridge above town. The kind of gray that wasn't dramatic, just honest, that said, this is what winter leaving looks like, and it isn't a performance. Zia held her hand and talked about a boy at preschool named Finn who had brought in a salamander and whether salamanders could live in a shoebox. Talia said she didn't think a shoebox was adequate habitat. Zia said, what about a bigger box? Talia said she'd look it up. Zia accepted this with the pragmatic optimism of a child who had learned that I'll look it up usually meant yes. They were 2 blocks from the clinic when Zia stopped walking. Mom. Her voice had changed, not afraid, but altered in some specific way that Talia had learned over 4 years to take seriously. The register children used when they were processing something they didn't have language for yet. There's a man looking at us. Talia should have kept walking. She should have squeezed Zia's hand and said something easy and guided them both forward without looking up. She looked up. He was standing at the edge of the parking lot across the street. Dark coat, no umbrella. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe she'd spent 4 years sanding him down to something manageable in her head. His hair was shorter. There was something in his jaw that was different. Harder, or maybe that had always been there and she'd been too certain she understood him to see it clearly. His eyes were the same, gold green, the particular shade she had never found a clean name for and had stopped trying to name after she left, because naming things made them real. He was looking at Zia. The world didn't stop. The streetlight cycled. A truck moved through the intersection. Somewhere behind her, someone's wind chime went in the March air, and her heart kept beating, but wrong, like it had skipped its own instructions and was trying to improvise. She watched the moment he saw it. Watched it move through him, the recognition, the arithmetic. Zia had Talia's eyes, mostly, but the shape of her jaw was his, the particular way she stood with her weight on her left foot when she was thinking about something, that was his. Talia had noticed it when Zia was 2 and had not let herself look at it directly since. Mom, Zia again tugging her sleeve, do you know him? Come on. She put her hand on Zia's shoulder. Her voice came out level, which cost her more than she could calculate in that moment. Let's go in the back way. She turned them south and walked. Not ran. Walked. With her heart in her throat, and the feeling on the back of her neck that didn't need to be confirmed. She dropped Zia at the clinic's back door, where Nina, her receptionist and the most reliable person in Creston, was already unlocking for the morning. "I need 20 minutes, Talia said. Nina looked at her face. Nina had raised 3 kids and was not a woman who needed things explained. "Take 30, she said. "I'll start the coffee." Talia walked to the small park at the end of Alder Street, the one with a bench facing the creek and a wooden sign that said Creston Mundy Green in letters that had been fading for at least a decade. She sat. She looked at the creek. She told herself to think instead of feel, which was a skill she had developed in the worst year of her life and had been refining ever since. Caine Holloway was in Creston, Oregon. The fact sat in her chest with weight. Creston had 2,000 people and a Wednesday farmer's market and a clinic she ran and a preschool where they knew her daughter by name, by temperament, by her particular insistence that salamanders deserved better housing. It was not a place that mapped onto Caine's world in any direction. She had done everything right. She had taken a name that wasn't hers, Cara Aldridge, assembled from her grandmother's first name and a road sign in Idaho, and she had moved into it like a house she intended to stay in. She had told no one where she was going, not her colleagues at the hospital in Seattle, not her mother, not Desi. Desi. The name arrived in her chest the same way it always did, with the image attached. The hotel lobby in Vancouver, the photographs on her phone screen. Caine and a woman Talia didn't recognize, in an embrace that left no room for misinterpretation. The message Desi had typed below it, "I'm so sorry. I've been trying to find a way to tell you. This has been going on for months." She had believed it. She had not even questioned it because Desi was her oldest friend, the person who had sat with her through her father's death and her residency and the terrifying first weeks of understanding what Caine's life actually was behind the doors she wasn't allowed to open. If Desi said it, it was true. That had been the bedrock of her life for 15 years. She pressed her palms flat on the bench and held herself there. "You changed your hair." She didn't turn around. She had heard the footsteps on the gravel path. She'd been waiting for them. "It grows," she said. She heard him stop a few feet behind the bench. She heard him breathe. Then he came around and sat on the other end of it, leaving distance, which was not what she'd expected. She'd expected him to stand. He looked at the creek. She looked at the creek, the March sky reflected off the water in flat silver. "Oregon," he said. "Oregon," she agreed. Of all the, he stopped himself, seemed to decide something. How long? Almost 4 years. A silence that had weight in it. Caine. She said his name because she had to start somewhere. "Why are you in Creston?" "Commercial property." His voice was controlled, the way it always was, the compression of a man who had trained himself to reveal nothing until he chose to. "A distribution facility 3 blocks north of here. My acquisition team flagged it 2 months ago. I flew up this morning to close." "You didn't know I was here." "No." He turned to look at her then, and his voice was still flat, but something under it was not. "I didn't know you were anywhere. I looked for 8 months, Talia. After that He stopped. His jaw worked once. "I convinced myself you were safe somewhere, that you'd had reasons I didn't understand and had made a choice. That, looking further, was trespass." She looked at him from the corner of her eye. His coat was dark and completely wrong for Creston. His hands were on his knees. His profile was the same as it had always been, which was the part she found most unfair. "The child," he said. She had prepared for this, had rehearsed it in the dark, on the nights when Zia was asleep and the house was quiet enough that her own thoughts got too loud. She had assembled arguments and ordered them carefully. Every one of them vanished. "Her name is Zia," she said. She heard him exhale, something unsteady in it, carefully caught. "How old?" "She'll be 4 in June." The creek moved. Somewhere across the park, someone was walking a dog that was interested in everything. Talia watched it and waited. "Is she mine?" he asked. The question was so quiet it was almost nothing. But it landed the way quiet things did, completely, with nothing to soften the impact. She looked at him, at the jaw that was her daughter's jaw, at the eyes that carried the same amber green as Zia's, the shade she had never been able to name and had eventually stopped trying. "Yes," she said. He said nothing. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his face that she couldn't catalog, too many things happening at once, none of them small. Then he looked back at the creek. "I'm not leaving Creston," he said. "Caine, I'm not leaving." The same words, but what was in them had shifted from statement into something structural, load-bearing, the kind of thing that held up everything else. "You can call a lawyer. You can do whatever you think you need to do. But I looked at that little girl's face 20 minutes ago, and I am not walking away from this." She stood up. She needed to be standing. "You don't get to show up after 4 years and tell me what you're doing." "You're right." He didn't move. "I don't get to do most of what I've apparently been doing. But I'm here. She's here. And I'm not leaving." She looked at him. He looked at the water. "There's something you need to know," she said, "before any of this goes further." She stopped because the next part was the hardest part, the part she had never said out loud to anyone. "I was 8 weeks pregnant when I left Seattle. I didn't know yet. I found out 6 weeks later in a motel in Spokane." She watched his face very carefully. "I didn't take her from you to punish you," she said. "I took her away from the photographs your friend sent me and the story I believed and your voice on the phone telling me not to come back. I want you to understand the difference. What I did because I thought I had no other option, not to hurt you." He was very still. "I need to get to the clinic," she said. "Come at noon, we'll talk." She left him sitting in the park. She got through the morning the way she had learned to get through hard things, by putting one foot exactly in front of the other and not looking at the full distance. Nina had the appointments organized and the coffee made, and the look of someone who understood that some mornings did not require explanation. Talia took the 8 o'clock, a retired schoolteacher with a persistent cough, and then the 9:15, a young woman whose anxiety had been building since February. She was present for both of them. She was exactly as present as she needed to be, which was the skill that 4 years of being the only adult in her daughter's life had built in her. At 11:45, she was reviewing labs in the back office when Nina appeared in the doorway. "There's a woman in reception," Nina said, in the particular voice she used when something needed to be managed carefully. "Says she's an old friend." Something moved through Talia's chest, an old instinct that had been buried under 4 years of routines and early mornings and the careful peace of this town. "Expensive coat," she said, though she already knew. "Like she took a wrong turn from somewhere with valet parking," Nina said. Talia set down the labs. She sat in the back office for 45 seconds. She counted them. Then she stood, smoothed her white coat, and walked to reception. Desi was standing at the front window, looking at the street. She was wearing cream-colored wool that didn't belong in Creston, and her hair was the same honey brown it had always been, falling in careful waves that took 40 minutes to produce and were designed to look effortless. She turned when Talia came in. She smiled, the same smile she had always used in rooms where she needed to control how she was perceived. "Kara," she said, with a light emphasis on the false name that communicated quietly and precisely that she knew it was false. "My office," Talia said. She did not smile. She turned and walked. She did not wait to see if Desi followed because she already knew Desi would. She closed the office door. She stood behind her desk because it was her desk and her office, and this was her town. She did not offer a seat. "How did you find me?" she said. It took a long time. Desi's hands were folded in front of her, the composed posture she always used under pressure. "You were very thorough, but someone posted on a travel forum about a small clinic on the Oregon coast. They called the doctor oddly competent for the middle of nowhere. It sounded exactly like you." A small pause. "I came because I was worried." "You came because he's here." Something shifted in Desi's face. Not guilt. Talia had prepared herself for guilt and was watching specifically for it, and what she saw instead was something sharper: impatience. Like a woman who has been managing a complicated situation for a very long time and is simply tired of the weight of it. "He found you," Desi said. "He found a property he was buying. He didn't know I was here." "Talia." Desi's voice went quiet. "Men like him don't have coincidences. Everything he—" "Stop," Talia said it without raising her voice. "I want to talk about the photographs you sent me." A silence stretched between them. "I know what you did," Talia said. "I've looked at the metadata on those images. The woman in those photographs was a composite. The image was fabricated." She paused. "I want to hear you say it." Desi looked at her. The composure didn't break. That was the part that landed hardest. Not anger, not guilt, just a woman standing very still and deciding what the next move was. "I loved him," Desi said. 3 words, no preamble, no softening. "I loved him for 2 years while you were together. I told myself I was managing it, that I was being a good friend, waiting for something I didn't even let myself name because you were my best friend and what I wanted was impossible." She looked at the window. "And then I stopped being patient." "So you built a lie," Talia said, "and you sent it to me and you watched me disappear." "I told myself I was setting you free." Desi's voice was quiet but certain, from a man who had people working for him, who did things you didn't want to know about, from a life that was going to close around you eventually. "I told myself I was doing it for you." "Were you lying to yourself or to me?" The question sat between them. The office was very still. "Both," Desi said finally. The word cost her something. Talia could see the small fracture in the composure. "I wanted him. I wanted the version of my life where you were gone, and I was the one he turned to. I built a story around that want because the want alone wasn't something I could live with. And after I left, he didn't turn to you." "No." Her voice flattened. "He looked for you for 8 months, and it was the most painful thing I have ever watched from a distance. And then he stopped, and I thought it was over. But you kept track of me." A pause. "Yes. You knew I had Zia. I knew you were pregnant when you left. I'd seen you 2 weeks before and something was." She stopped. "I kept track. I didn't interfere. I just knew." "You knew I had his daughter," Talia said, "and you said nothing. For 4 years you let me raise her alone, on a false name, in a town that wasn't mine. You let her grow up without her father because you wanted her father. I told myself it was protecting you. That's what you needed to believe." Desi looked at her. Something was happening in her face now, different from everything before. Something stripped down, like a woman who has finally run out of the version of events that made her look better than she was. Talia set her hands flat on the desk. "Here is what is going to happen," she said. Her voice was even, and she was proud of how even it was. "You are going to leave Creston today. You are going to write down, in a document I can use if I need to, exactly what you did, the photographs, the fabrication, all of it. You will send it to my email, and you will not contact me, Zia or Caine, until I tell you otherwise." Desi stared at her. "I'm not going to be your enemy," Talia said. "I don't have the energy for it, and Zia deserves better than a mother consumed by it. But I am also not going to pretend that you didn't take 4 years from my daughter's life. Those years are gone. You cannot make that equation balance, and neither can I." She met her eyes directly. "Write the document, then go home." For a long moment, Desi didn't move. Then she nodded once, small, tight. Something in her had gone very still. "Is there anything you want to say?" Talia said. "I'm sorry." Desi said it plainly, without performance, without the softening Talia might have expected. "I know what that's worth to you right now. I know it isn't much. I'm saying it anyway because not saying it would be the last piece of cowardice I have left, and I think I'm done with cowardice." She picked up her bag. "I'll send the document." She left. Talia stood in her office until she heard the clinic's front door open and close. Then she sat down in her chair and pressed both hands to her face and held herself there for 30 seconds. Not crying, just letting the full weight of it move through her. Not the anger, which she'd been managing all morning, but the grief underneath. The grief for 15 years of believing in something that had been a different shape than she thought. For the specific texture of trusting someone completely and learning too late the dimensions of what that trust had cost. She let it move through her. Then she straightened. She picked up the Beaumont file. She had 4 more appointments that afternoon, and she was going to be present for every one of them. She was. At 4 o'clock, she picked up Zia from the Creston family preschool, which was 2 blocks from the clinic, in a converted Victorian with a garden where the kids grew radishes they refused to eat. Zia came out talking about the salamander situation, which had apparently escalated significantly. Talia listened and answered and held her daughter's hand, and did not let herself think about what was waiting until they rounded the corner to the clinic and found Caine sitting on the front steps with his hands on his knees, looking at the ground. He looked up when he heard them coming. His eyes went to Zia first, which Talia understood. Zia looked at him with the direct, unfiltered assessment of a child who had not yet learned to pretend she wasn't looking. "You're the man from this morning," she said. "I am," he said. "You were looking at us." "I was." Zia considered this with the gravity it apparently deserved. "Why?" He looked at Talia. She gave him nothing. This was his question to answer, and his alone. "I thought I recognized you," he said finally, "from a long time ago." Zia absorbed this with the pragmatic acceptance of a child who had heard stranger things before noon. "We have soup at home," she said. "From last night. Mom puts cheese on it." "That sounds good," he said. Zia nodded, satisfied, and went inside with a purpose that suggested the salamander documentation needed to continue immediately. Talia sat down on the steps beside him. The afternoon light was going from gray to gold, the specific Oregon light that happened when the clouds broke in late afternoon, like they'd finally decided something. "She's remarkable," he said. His voice was rough at the edges. "She is," Talia agreed. "She has your jaw," Talia said. "Your left foot habit. She chews on her thumbnail when she's thinking, which is also yours. Everything else is mine or nobody's in particular." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been sitting here for 3 hours." "I know, Nina told me." "I wasn't trying to." He stopped. "I just didn't want to be a mile away. I didn't want to be somewhere she wasn't." She understood that. She wasn't going to tell him so yet. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and I want the truth, not the managed version." She looked at him squarely. "What actually happened with the woman in those photographs Desi sent me?" His head turned toward her slowly. Something in his face tightened and then released. "There was no other woman," he said. "Not then. Not for the entirety of us. Whatever she sent you, she built it. I spent months after you left trying to understand what you'd found out, because I assumed you'd found out something real, about the business, about something I'd done or failed to do. It never occurred to me that she was the source." He paused. "I should have seen it. I'd noticed how she looked at me. I told myself it was nothing because she was your friend, and I needed to believe that." "She confessed this morning," Talia said, "in my office. All of it." He looked at her. "What did you do?" "I told her to go home and write it down." She paused. "She will. She's many things, but she's not a coward. Not anymore." The last of the afternoon light moved across the clinic's wooden siding. "I said things to you," he said, "on the phone after you left. You called from a number I didn't recognize, and I was furious. I thought you'd left without an explanation because of something you'd decided about me, and I said things I have spent 4 years wishing I could take back. I told you not to come back." He stopped. "I thought I was reacting to something you'd done. What I was actually doing was being the kind of man who reached for cruelty when he was afraid, and called it pride." "You were wrong about what I'd done," she said, "and you were still wrong about what you said. I need you to let both of those things exist at the same time without trying to collapse them into one, because it would be easier." "Okay," he said. "I am furious," she said. "I'm going to be furious about this for a long time, about the 4 years, about raising her alone in a name that wasn't mine, about the specific look on her face some mornings when she talks around the shape of what's missing without having the words for it. Her voice stayed level through all of it, which cost her more than she showed. That fury doesn't have one clean target. Some of it is for Desi. Some of it is for the lie. And some of it is for you, for the words you said, for the doors you kept closed, for making me carry the weight of not knowing what was behind them. She met his eyes. I'm not going to perform forgiveness because the crisis is over and it seems like the next reasonable thing. I'm not there yet. I know, he said, no argument, no deflection. I need you to give me time, she said, and give Zia more time. She's almost 4. She doesn't have a frame for this. I know. And when you are with her, actually with her, not managing the situation, not treating her like a variable you've accounted for. He turned to look at her, and something in his face went very still. The other kind of still, not controlled, just complete. She is not a variable, he said. I know what you're capable of treating as one. Not her, the words came out rough and absolute. Never her. She believed him. She wasn't ready to say that out loud yet. There's leftover soup, she said, standing. Zia extended the invitation, and I'm not rescinding it. But after dinner, you go back to wherever you're staying, and tomorrow we talk, seriously talk, about what this looks like, what she knows, what she's ready for, what pace this actually goes at. He stood, he was taller standing. She'd let herself forget that too. The distribution facility on the north end, he said. What about it? I'm withdrawing the bid this afternoon. He looked at the clinic's facade. I'm going to find something to invest in here that doesn't announce itself. Something that belongs in this town instead of importing itself. A pause. Not for you. For the kind of man I've been trying to become for the past 3 years, when I had no particular reason to try except that I'd run out of excuses not to. She studied him for a moment. The light was almost gone now, the gold folding back into gray, the coast doing what the coast did. Then she opened the clinic door. Soup is from last night, she said. Minestrone. She'll want you to put the cheese on yourself, because she has very strong feelings about cheese autonomy. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. I can manage that, he said, and he stepped through the door into the lit interior where his daughter was explaining something to Nina with her notebook open, and her voice carrying the focused authority of a child who has researched something thoroughly and intends to be taken seriously. He stopped just inside the doorway. He stood there for a moment, just stood, not moving, and Talia watched him look at Zia the way a man looked at something he had not let himself believe was real until this exact second. Then Zia looked up, assessed him briefly, and said, "You can sit here," pointing to the chair beside her, because she had already decided where things belonged. He sat. The weeks that followed were not easy. She hadn't expected easy, and she was done pretending she had. What she hadn't entirely anticipated was the specific texture of this difficulty, the way Zia took to him, the way small children took to things they had decided to accept completely, which was to say, entirely and without ceremony. The second time he came for dinner, Zia asked him to read the bedtime story about the lighthouse keeper and the seal. He read it wrong, skipped a paragraph, changed the seal's name. Zia corrected him without mercy. He accepted the corrections with the seriousness they deserved and read it again properly from the beginning. When he came back to the kitchen, where Talia was washing dishes, there was something in his face she recognized as the look of a man who has just understood something permanent and irreversible about himself. Desi sent the document 4 days after she left Creston. 4 pages, handwritten, scanned, everything she had done in the flat, factual language of someone who has decided that honesty is the only currency she has left worth spending. At the end, I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking, when Zia is old enough to understand that families are complicated and love can go wrong in 100 directions, that you let her know she has an aunt who made the worst choice she could have made and has been paying for it ever since. Talia read it twice. She put it in the drawer of her bedside table. She did not respond for 3 weeks. When she did, it was 4 sentences. Not warm, not cold. The door was open, narrow but open, and it would stay open until Zia decided for herself what she wanted it to be. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in September, when the coastal light came in low and particular through the kitchen windows, Caine drove up from Portland, where he had taken a temporary lease while the half-renovated building he'd bought on Creston's Main Street was being rebuilt into something that actually belonged there. Zia was already on the porch with her salamander research notebook, which had grown to 17 pages. Talia stood at the kitchen window with her coffee and watched her daughter greet her father with the matter-of-fact warmth of a child who had decided some time ago that he was going to be a fixed point in her world. The negotiation of that, the patience it had cost him, the specific way he had learned to follow her lead instead of setting the pace, was its own private thing. One Talia had watched from a careful distance and had let herself feel the full weight of only in private. She was still angry. She had told him that, and she would tell him again when she needed to, because the anger was real, and the grief was real, and she was not going to bury either of them in the name of moving forward faster than was honest. He had stopped trying to manage the anger. That had mattered more than she'd expected. On a September morning, with the Oregon coast gray and patient outside, her daughter was telling her father about salamanders with the voice she used when she was talking about something that mattered. And he was listening the way she had learned over months, meant he was actually filing it, keeping it, making it part of the structure of who this child was to him. Talia drank her coffee. The years that had been taken from them were real. The cost of them was real, and the arithmetic would never come out, even no matter how many times she ran it. But Zia was on the porch with her notebook, and the September light was coming through the gray the way it did on the coast when it had finally decided something, and the future, however unfinished, however much it still had to figure out, was still entirely theirs to build. She set down her mug. She opened the back door. She walked out into the kind of morning that didn't need to be explained to anyone.